Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Today we will take the 14th lecture, which is about the bioinformatics and public health informatics. So let us start. So by the end of this lecture, you will be able to define bioinformatics, state the importance of bioinformatics in future medical treatment, describe the Human Genome Project and its many important implications, describe the application of bioinformatics in genetic profiling of individuals and populations, define the scope and goals of public health informatics, and state the significance of the public health information network, and at the last, you will be able to state the significance of syndromic surveillance for early detection of bioterrorism and natural epidemics. So, bioinformatics is a branch of biomedical informatics. It has gained increasing fame in the recent years, and we often refer to it as computational biology. So bioinformatics can be defined as the field of science in which biology, this is biology, and computer science and statistics merge to form a single discipline to analyze, manage, and store biological data. So the bioinformatics make use of fundamental aspects of computer science, such as the databases and artificial intelligence, to store or develop algorithms for facilitating the development of testing of biological hypotheses. And here we have some examples of biological hypotheses. To find the gene in DNA sequences of various organisms, and also developing protein models. So we will develop protein models for each organism, predicting structure or function of newly discovered proteins. So these are the sequence of the protein which will be input to the computer application, and the computer application will predict the protein structure and examining evolutionary relationship between the DNA sequences or the protein sequences and compare between them. So the common uses of bioinformatics include the identification of candidate genes and single nucleotide polymorphisms, the SNPs. Okay, and the SNPs will give us the chromosome, or will be responsible on making the chromosome and the DNA, and these amino acids will make the protein, and the protein will make a living cells, and the group of living cells will make the tissues, and the group of tissues will make the different organs in the body, and the organs and the systems will make the human body. So we say that bioinformatics is the merge between biology, computer science, and statistics. The biologist will collect molecular data, the DNA and the protein sequences, the gene expression, and the computer scientist and the mathematician and the statistician will develop tools and databases and softwares or algorithms to store and analyze the biological data. and the merge between them will give us the bioinformatician who study biological questions by analyzing the molecular data. So bioinformatics include the identification of the candidate genes and SNPs, and they identify it in order to reach a better understanding of the genetic basis of a specific disease, and also the unique adaptations of living cells and the desirable properties, especially in agricultural species, and the difference between populations and the comparison between them. And in another word, we can uh, say that bioinformatics tries to understand the organizational principles within the nucleic acid and protein sequences that called proteomics. So the bioinformatics will provide the technologies that enable the scientist to apply scientific methods to interpret and deal with large-scale biological data produced through genomics, proteomics, and pharmacogenomics. The genomics, it's the area within the genetics that will be concerned with the sequencing and the analysis of the organism's genome. So they try to study the genes اللي هي دراسة الجينات الوراثية. The proteomics is the study of proteins structure and function. فالبروتين يتكون من الأحماض الأمينية, and each protein will have a different amino acid structure and a different function. The pharmacogenomics is the study of how genes affect a person's response to drugs. So they will try to study the responses of individuals who are affected by different doses of the drugs. So they will try to study the person or the genes which affected of the person who respond to a normal dose. And here they will study the genes of this person and the response to a lower dose of the medication. And here they will study the genes of the patient who take the higher dose of the medication. And here they will study the response of the individual and the gene's response to to an alternative medication, different medication. So the study of the response of the genes to the drugs and the different doses, this is called pharmacogenomics. So drug companies, they face a huge expenses when they develop a new drug, and they need to follow a long road and steps to produce a new drug. And drug can fail for some common reasons, such as there is no clinical efficacy and the side effects of the medication and some commercial issues. And trying these drugs on animal models are often inadequate for the development and evaluation of drugs to treat human disease. As a result, the pharmacogenomics is an excellent example of how bioinformatics can be used within the development of pharmaceutical business and for drug discovery and utilization. So the importance of pharmacogenomics, it helps in discovering drugs that work better in certain patient groups, such as gender, age, race, ethnicity, with possible genetic variants. So there are many examples about how drugs can affect different genes and different race uh, of the patient. One of them is uh, the role of uh, enzyme called TBMT, which is an important enzyme that has an important role in the chemotherapy treatment of common childhood leukemia. So this enzyme will break down the thioprines, which the thioprines is the medication of the leukemia at kids or for kids, and this enzyme will break down the medication and convert it to a waste that can be flushed out the human body. But a small percentage of Caucasians have genetic variants that prevent them from producing this enzyme, اللي هو TBMT. And as a result, the thiobrines will elevate to toxic levels in the patient body because they are not able to produce, or their genes not able to produce this enzyme or this protein which can help them to flush out the and break down the drug. So this is one example that show you how the drugs can work in different or certain patient groups. The second importance, what drugs to avoid due to higher incidence of side effects that are genetically modulated. So some of the people will have side effects from higher drugs or higher dosage. Uh, so, for example, the doctor will be able to analyze the patient genetic profile, and then they can prescribe the best available drug therapy from the beginning. And they don't need to try or guess what is the right drug. They can return to the genetic profile of the patient, and according to his genetic profile, they can choose the best available drug, which can speed the recovery and lower the side effects of the medications. The third point is new indications for an old drug. So here we have drug repurposing اللي هو إعادة استخدام الدراج في العلاج شيء آخر أو مرض آخر. For example, the minoxidil. The minoxidil is a treatment used for hypertension اللي هو علاج الضغط, and now they reformulated into a special cream or foam or spray called Rogina. And this Rogina will help the patient to grow hair or for hair growth. So they repurpose the hypertension drug to treat the hair growth of the patient. The fourth point, new targets for existing drug. So here we will have or we will target a new um, disease or a new condition for an existing drugs, like the treatment of tongue cancer. They are using RET inhibitors, or a treatment, a chemotherapy called RET inhibitors for tongue cancer. And this treatment is also used for lung cancer. So they target more than type of cancer or different type of cancer with one treatment, one medication. And the last point is improving the clinical decision support for electronic health records. So the current mode of the uh, prescribing drugs by physician, they choose the dosage of the medication based on the weight and the age of the patient. And by using a genetic profile uh, and adding this information to the electronic health records, the doctor will have a clinical decision support that will help him in based on the genetic profile of the patient to choose the right dose of the medication. And this will allow the a careful monitoring and also treatment. And also we can the doctor or the physician can have the knowledge of particular disease risk from the genetic profile of the patient, and this will help him in monitor and the disease and also treat take preventions or plan preventions for the patient before uh, he caught or he will be a high risk uh, level. So this figure demonstrates the bi-directional nature of data and information that will flow between the bioinformatics and the health informatics. So with the emergence of the translational bioinformatics, which is due to the rapid advances in bioinformatics, uh, with faster and cheaper DNA sequencing and more widespread adoption of electronic health records, all of this was a push for the development and the emergence of translational bioinformatics. So now, from bench to bedside, which is a term used to describe the process by which the result of the result of the laboratory discoveries are directly will be used and developed to new ways to treat the patients. And this is an application of bioinformatics methods and discoveries to clinical data to improve the human health. So the translation bioinformatics is the informatics method that link the biological entities, the genes, the proteins, and the small molecules, and two clinical entities, the disease, the symptoms, and the drugs, or vice versa. so from bench to bedside or from bedside to bench. So it will bridge the biological knowledge which is acquired from the bioinformatics and the clinical knowledge which is acquired from the health informatics using the translational bioinformatics. So this link is the innovations from bench to bedside. So the importance of bioinformatics are diagnosing hereditary diseases اللي هي الأمراض الوراثية and discovering a future drug target, so they can target a different condition or another condition with um, an existed drug, developing personalized drugs based on genetic profiles. So this is called personalized medicine. So not before, like before, the drug will be uh, uh, used by a whole group of population. Now the drugs will be designed according to the individual genetic profile. And the last point is developing gene therapies to treat diseases with a strong genomic component, such as the cancer. So one approach that has been explored to enable the gene therapies is it involves the use of genetically altered virus. So they will change the virus or the genetic of the virus that carry the human DNA and put a human DNA inside the virus, and then it will target the affected cell, and the affected cell will be infected by the virus, which will then transfer the correct gene, the correct human gene the uh, to the bad cell or the disease cell. And also another way to use the bioinformatics is by manipulating the genomic in other organisms. So they can change the genomic of the microbes, and this was shown uh, a promise for energy production and biofuels, where they try to change the uh, waste using specific microbes who are genetically manipulated to produce energy, and also for environmental cleanup, and also for industrial processing and waste reductions. And we have also it's already done now, the genetically engineered plants and agriculture products, where they try to change the genetic of the plants to make it disease resistant and more fruitful, uh, and also to face specific environmental conditions. The Human Genome Project. Uh, this This is an international collaborative project which was started in 1990 and finished in 2003. So it took 13 years to develop. It cost $3 billion to create a model of a human genome اللي هو الخريطة الجينية للإنسان أو للبشر. So it also identified the location of many human genes and provide information about their structure and the organization. And also, it made the sequence of the human genome and tools to analyze the data uh, freely and all. And this project is available online via the internet. So we have many implications of the Human Genome Project. So there 3 million SNPs were discovered, and there are also uh, ethical and legal and social issues have been raised and discussed. So uh, the program or the project identify and address issue raised by the genomic research that would affect the individuals, families, and society. The main issues or the main area that they focused on the privacy and the integration of the new genetic, the ethical issues surrounding the design and conduct of genetic research, and the education of healthcare. And also they have or develop huge relational databases to store and retrieve this massive information because they discover 3 billion base uh, pairs, and they need to have a huge relational database to store and retrieve all this information. Um Also, a new technology was developed, like the DNA arrays, the gene chips. This technology was used to speed up the analysis and reduce the necessity to sequence the entire human genome to the analysis and comparison of the DNA fragments. And the last implication is the significant drop in cost to several $100s and taking only a few hours to uh, develop the genetic profile of the organisms. The personal genomics, this is a branch of genomics which is concerned with the sequencing, analysis, and the interpretation of the genome on an individual. The goal of this branch is to have tailor-made medications, اللي هو personalized medication, and treatment that will target the individual and not a group having little in common with the individual, which is the personal medication from the pharmacogenomics field. So here they will try to develop uh, and design and custom the medication treatment to target a specific individual, not a group of people. The second goal is to create a database of population genomics to offer biosurveillance for future outbreaks of infectious disease. So they will have a database that has all the information about the population genomic, which will help uh, to monitor the changes in the genomic after infectious diseases and epidemic outbreaks. And the last goal is to predict or confirm genetic disease. So they use the personal genomics to confirm that this person has a genetic disease, or to predict if this person will develop in the future a specific genetic disease. The personal genetic testing. So, as shown in the figure here, The cost of to perform the DNA sequencing of the entire human genome uh, was or has dropped over the past decades uh, from the initial cost of 1,000 or 1 million, sorry, $1 million to the current cost of less than $10,000 per genome in 2013 or 11 here. So with the drop of the cost, many patients and individual want to know their own genetic profile, even if the consequences are not are uncertain. The following here we have example of personal genetics companies which are direct to the consumer genomics. The first company is the DNA Direct, which is a company that offers online genetic testing and counseling, and they offer both the patient and physician education, uh, and they have a staff for genetic counselor. Then the second company is the Ancestry DNA. Okay, so this company provide a separate service offered by the Ancestry.com. Their analysis will determine the ethnicity estimates and also will identify the remote cousins. Using the saliva samples, which is needed uh, to make the personal genetic testing. They will cost less than $100, um, and the turnaround time is about 6 weeks to get the result. The third company is 23andMe, which is a direct to the consumer online genetic testing company for also less than $100. They will send a testing kit. Okay, they will send you a testing kit um, for the consumer to your home, and by using and analyzing the saliva with a turnaround time of 4 to 6 weeks. Currently, they are look for 240 disease and the drug response conditions, and also they offer analysis of ancestry based on the genetic profile. The last company is Merit company, which is specialized in genetic testing for cancers with hereditary component such as the breast and the ovarian, colon and prostate and pancreatic cancer. They discovered a test for the BRCA gene, which are the genes responsible for developing breast cancer. The analysis of the entire genome would not only find the genes which are responsible for a specific disease, but could also reveal private information about or confidential information about the individual physical traits, behavior, and even their ancestry. So the genetic testing has some ethical issues which need to be solved first. So testing is not regulated. There are no regulation and guidelines to regulate the test, and it lacks external standards for accuracy. It needs to be uh, uh, the test need to have a standard. So by following the standard, we can make sure that the test is accurate, and it has not demonstrated economic viability or clinical benefits, and has the potential to mislead customers. So, in order for the test to be reliable, there is a need for new technologies and specialties to be developed, and uh, also we need to make the genetic testing to be relevant, and this is by uh, doing a genetic test for uh, a genetic disease that have an effective treatment to offer. Otherwise, there is a little benefit of discovering abnormal gene which can cause a genetic disease without having a treatment to offer for the patient. The test also must be cost effective, and um, as many currently they are too expensive, and usually the genetic test will lead or cause many further tests to be ordered, and this will lead to an increase in the healthcare costs and expenses. The patient must be sure of accuracy before undergoing major procedures. So, uh, finding the abnormal gene is the starting point, and the genetic test will have to be highly sensitive and accurate and specific to be accepted, and in order to make the individual willing to undergo a major procedure, major medical procedure, or major treatment can affect the individual life. For example, uh, if a female discovered that she has the genes using the genetic test, she has discovered that she are carrying the BRCA gene, or the genes that are responsible for breast cancer, and the treatment for in this case is to undergo uh, a major medical procedure called breast mastectomy, where she remove the breast to prevent the cancer. So, for the patient to be willing to go under this major procedure, she need to be the test. It should be perfect and accurate, so the treatment will be um, uh, will have the clinical benefits for the patient. The patients will need genetic counseling, as most physicians have not had this training. So when the genetic test is provided to the patient, the patient need someone, or an expert can translate or interpret the genetic test and explain what is the result means for in regard to his health. So it's important that the genetic counseling be available to help the patient understand the implication of genetic risk test, and also, uh, and this is uh, not happening now, because the healthcare lacks adequate numbers of genetics and genetic counselors that who understand the applications of the data. So how we can integrate the genomic data with the electronic health record of the patient. Um, as genetic data will be likely part of many electronic health records in the future, the cost of sequencing will become less of a challenge, but the data storage must be increased due to a large amount of genetic data. So in order for the electronic health record to incorporate the genomic data, uh, first, they must store data in structured format, so it will be easier for the computer to understand it. Data must be standard space, so we need to figure out a data standard that can be suitable for the genomic data, so it can be shared. And phenotypic information must also be stored as structured data. So all the physical information also it should be stored as structured data to make it easier for the computer to understand, to solve and compute and process. Data must be available for use by rule engines. So the based on rule engines, the data will be available for the professionals to use it and to group the people based on the data, the genomic data. The electronic health records must be able to display information needed by the clinician based on phenotypic and genotypic data. So we need to have a way or a user interface that will display the information which is needed by the individual according to a specific phenotypic or genotypic data. And at the last, data standards and clinical decision support will need to be enhanced. As we said, we need to make changes to data standard to include the genetic information and also develop computer-based clinical decision support tools to help the clinician to use genetic information to treat a specific condition with a strong genetic component such as breast cancer. So this tool could be integrated into the electronic health records and for example, we can integrate whether the woman with a family history of breast cancer need to test PERCA1 and PERCA2 genes, and which women who already have breast cancer may benefit from additional genetic test uh, uh, to offer a speed recovery from her medical condition. Digital family history. It will likely be at least a decade before we can intelligently integrate the genomic data into electronic health records. Um, in the meantime, we can expect some use of the family history to alert the clinician of genetic risk of specific medical conditions such as the cancer. So uh, they are the family history now are the family history data is generally entered now as unstructured text, and data standards they have been developed so family history can be part of electronic health records and personal health records. So these data can be shared. The second part of our presentation is about the public health informatics. Public health is the science of and art of preventing disease, prolonging life, and promoting the health through organized efforts and informed choices of society, organizations, public and private communities, and individuals. So while the doctors treat people who are sick, those who are working in public health try to prevent people from getting sick or injured in the first place. And they promote wellness by encouraging healthy behaviors and healthy lifestyle. Examples of public health actions or programs, the restaurant inspection and school nutrients and vaccination programs. So the restaurant inspection اللي هو تفتيش المطاعم وذلك باستخدام this is a program that will consider a public health program and action. Also, when they prevent the school from selling junk food to her student, this is a public health actions. The vaccination programs for children or during specific seasons like the flu vaccination programs, which will provided and in, provided by the health, the Ministry of Health to the public during the winter seasons or the flu seasons. This is another public health programs or example for public health programs. So the public health surveillance, this is ongoing systematic collection, analysis, and interpretation and dissemination of data regarding a health events, infection or poisoning, for example, for use in the public health action or programs to reduce morbidity and mortality and to improve the health. So هي المراقبة بطريقة منظمة وتجميع منظم وتحليل المعلومات ومعالجة المعلومات وتفسيرها ونشر هذه المعلومات بخصوص حدث صحي سواء كان تفشي مرض معدي أو انتشار سم. أيضا this is for the use of the public health action. يعني المفروض أن هذه المعلومات تؤدي إلى action تخص رعاية اللي هو صحة العامة. فينشأ عن هذه المعلومات فعل يحمي صحة العامة أو برامج حتى تقلل من حالات الموت والإصابة بسبب تفشي هذا الوباء أو السم. So the public health surveillance is essential to understand the health of the population, monitor the health of population, then take action and develop programs to reduce the morbidity and mortality and to improve the health. The public health informatics, we say that informatics is the process by which raw data will be turned into information and subsequently to knowledge. So the public health informatics it's the systematic application of information and computer science and technology to the public health practice, research, and learning. The public health surveillance is the eye and ears of public health. So they monitor the population health, and report their data to the public health organizations. The the ultimate goal of the public health surveillance is to monitor medical diseases and conditions rapidly and accurately, and to detect, prevent, and reduce the spread of epidemics, the effects of natural disasters such as uh, volcanoes and earthquake and bioterrorism. So the most critical component in any disease investigation or prevention of the an epidemic or reducing the effect of natural disease or bioterrorism is the availability of timely data and information to figure out the possible source of the outbreak, and spread this information. And by spreading the information using the information technology into public health and medical fields, this will have a significantly improved disease surveillance and enhanced early detection of community or population-based epidemics, like the current epidemic, COVID-19. So, by monitoring the population, the government can figure out the most affected city, and try to detect, prevent, and reduce the spread of epidemic by taking precautious precaution measures, such as locking down the cities or locking down specific neighborhoods, and other preventive measures. Uh, so the information loop of public health surveillance consists of many parties. So first, the physicians the will detect the disease or the condition, and report it to the healthcare provider, the hospital, the clinic, and the clinics, which send a report or a message to the uh, local health department, uh, which will forward the information to the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, and finally they will send the information to the World Health Organization for specific disease. Then the World Health Organization will send summaries, interpretation, recommendations to the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, to the local state and public health authority, then to the hospitals and to the physicians. And this is what is happening now with the COVID or with the new coronavirus. So first, the Chinese physician, they did detect the epidemic, the new corona, at the patient. Then they reported to their hospital and clinics, which reported to the Chinese uh, state health department, and the city or the state public health authority, they reported to the Chinese Center of Disease Control and Prevention, which will be under the Chinese Ministry of Health, who report the medical condition and the epidemic to the World Health Organization. Then after that, the World Health Organization, they study and provide summaries about the new coronavirus, their interpretation, the cases, the number of the cases, and they monitor the detected medical the detected cases around the world and reported to the Center of Disease Control and Prevention for each country, who will report it to their Ministry of Health and the local public health authority, and this is how it arrives to us through the Ministry of Health, who detect it, and the recommendation from the WHO return back to the Saudi Ministry of Health, and the Saudi Ministry of Health, they disseminate the information to the hospitals and the clinics, and also to the public through the media. So before this loop of information will go through the different parties and return from these parties using um, the traditional uh, communication uh, methods, such as using papers, fax, and mail. But now, with the advances of the information technology, it speeds the speed the process, and the public health surveillance will be effective and efficient to monitor the public health uh, and try to prevent this epidemics or condition. The electronic health records in healthcare providers, so they are necessary to make the process possible and efficient, as timely information delivery is critical here to signal the disease outbreak and to figure out the source of the outbreak. And as we said, the paper reporting is inadequate because it slows down the process. Uh, and these information usually they are very urgent or an urgent information. Um, Other interoperable systems, they support the exchange of these health information, need to be implemented too to uh, uh, make the exchange of information easy between the different parties and organizations. So the Public Health Information Network, PHIN, it's a Center for Disease Control and Prevention initiative. It established to provide tools and resources for efficient public health information access, exchange and use, and collaboration among multi-level of public health agencies and partners using and approved shared policies, standards, best practice, and services. So the PHIN seeks to establish a standardized way to exchange the public health data in real time in a secure manner. So the public health surveillance provide many services such as estimate significance of the problem, and determine the distribution of the illness, um, outline the natural history of the disease, detect epidemics, and identify epidemiological and laboratory research needs, uh, for example, to figure out what is the best treatment, evaluate programs and control measures to prevent the spread of the disease, detect changes in infectious diseases, the transmission of disease, and how it affects the people, monitor the changes in health practices and behaviors, like when they monitor the health practice of the health profession when they uh, wash their hand, access the quality and safety of healthcare, drugs, devices, diagnostic, and procedures. So they make sure that all provided drugs and the medical devices and the diagnostic tools and procedures are uh, uh, qualified and uh, safe for the patient, and support the public health planning to uh, provide uh, instruction and guidelines to prevent uh, any uh, health risks, and to promote the health of the public. The syndromic surveillance, uh, it's a type of public health surveillance that use health-related data which precede diagnosis and signal a sufficient probability of a case or an outbreak to warrant further public health responses. The syndromic surveillance uh, مراقبة معلومات خاصة بالمعلومات أو بيانات الصحية تسبق التشخيص. هذه المعلومات تكون كافية لإعطاء إشارة باحتمالية وجود تفشي لوباء أو لحالة مرضية معينة، وتحذير وزارة الصحة أو any public health agency to take a response for that. So the theory of syndromic surveillance is that during any attack or disease outbreak, the people will first develop symptoms. Then they will stay home from work or school, and they attempt to self-treat with over-the-counter medication, the OTC products اللي هي الأدوية اللي ممكن شرائها بدون وصفة طبية. And eventually they will see the physician with non-specific symptoms days before they are formally diagnosed and reported to the health department. So to identify such behavior, the syndromic surveillance system regularly monitor existing data for sudden changes or um, um, sudden changes or abnormality that might signal a disease outbreak. The syndromic surveillance system have been developed to include data from different sources. So they don't their objective is not to identify the cause of the outbreak. Rather, they provide data comparisons to allow public health officials to start outbreak investigation. For example, if multiple of individuals at a school um, or at company complain of stomach symptoms, vomiting or diarrhea over a short period of time, then the one can assume there is an outbreak of gastroenteritis condition. So this is considered syndromic surveillance. So syndromic data is based on symptoms and not hard evidence. So يراقبون فقط الأعراض المرضية. They don't have hard evidence such as confirmed lab test or result, which take times to get, and the experts try to predict epidemic and bioterrorism based on this early data. So the symptoms that usually monitored are botulism-like illnesses, food, for example, food poisoning from meat, febrile or fever illnesses, uh, influenza-like illnesses, and gastrointestinal or stomach symptoms, and hemorrhagic bleeding illnesses like Ebola, uh, and neurological syndromes, uh, rash-associated illnesses, uh, respiratory syndromes, shock, or coma. So the syndromic surveillance tried to monitor these symptoms, and the expert will try to predict if this is an epidemic or bioterrorism or uh, uh, or a false alarm data. The syndromic surveillance system can be developed by tracking the electronic health records of the patient, the unexplained deaths, and the insurance claims from the insurance medical company, the school and work absenteeism, and over-the-counter medication sales. over-the-counter medication sales اللي هي الأدوية التي تباع بدون وصفة، اللي هي مثل البنادول، فيفادول، ما تحتاج وصفة طبية للبيع، تكون موجودة في الصيدليات أو ممكن السوبر ماركت. Internal based health inquiries by the public. So هي أسئلة الببليك العامة ل مثلا لوزارة الصحة. track animal illnesses or deaths، إذا كان في مجموعة حيوانات نافقة أو طيور أو أسماك، هذه كلها بيانات يتابعها السيندروميك surveillance systems. The inspiration of tracking these source of data comes from the gastrointestinal disease outbreak in Milwaukee in United States in 1993. And that outbreak involved over 400,000 people who were eventually traced to the ancestral parasite Cryptosporidium in the water supply. So after the fact, it was discovered that sales of over-the-counter anti-diarrhea medications had increased more than threefold weeks before health officials knew about the outbreak. So if the over-the-counter sales or medication had been monitored, the logic goes to the thousands of infections might have been prevented. فحصل تفشي للوباء الوباء اللي هو خاص بالجهاز الهضمي في مدينة ملواكي في سنة 1993. هذا الوباء هذا التفشي للمرض أو للمشكلة الطبية في الجهاز الهضمي involved over 400,000 people. هذول الناس هم ناس شربوا من مياه ملوثة بباراسايت يسبب مشاكل في الجهاز الهضمي أو يسبب أعزكم الله الإسهال. فلاحظوا بعد ما تفشى هذا الوباء وبعد ما عرفوا السبب إنه السيلز حقت أو مبيعات الأدوات من غير وصفة الخاصة بمضادات الإسهال ارتفعت ارتفعت هذه المبيعات قبل 3 أسابيع من معرفة مسؤولين الصحة بهذا الوباء. فلو كانت المبيعات مراقبة كان ممكن كان في احتمالية أنهم يمنعون تفشي الحالة الطبية أو الحالة المرضية لكل هذا العدد من الناس. The syndromic surveillance objectives and challenges are the objectives is to identify the illness clusters early before diagnoses are confirmed and reported to public health agencies, and mobilize a rapid response, thereby reducing the morbidity and mortality, and improve the biosurveillance to detect bioterrorism. So the sooner health officials know about an attack or natural disease outbreak, the sooner they can treat those who have already been exposed and minimize the health consequences, or vaccinate some or all of the population to prevent further infection, and identify and isolate cases to prevent further transmission. So the syndromic surveillances challenges are to develop an elaborate system that can sort through the data and produce the early warning alarms, and to reduce false positive alarms. So the early warning system, they are especially important for bioterrorism اللي هو الإرهاب الحيوي, because unlike other forms of terrorism, it may not be clear that an attack has been taken place until the people start becoming ill. Moreover, if terrorism is the cause, early detection might be helpful to identify the terrorist and the responsible individuals. The false alarm to reduce the false positive alarms is to reduce the wrong cases or the wrong alarms. False alarm examples are the first example is the increment of over-the-counter selling. So the increment of over-the-counter sellings could be mean sale offers from the pharmacy, not an outbreak of disease. فإذا كثرت المبيعات للأدوية اللي ما تحتاج الوصفة الطبية، فهذا ممكن ما نفسرها كأنه انتشار لوباء، لا، ممكن يكون الصيدلية مسوية تخفيضات، أو يكون في موسم للعروض، وبكذا ارتفعت المبيعات. The second example for false positive alarm is the absenteeism rate, or the absenteeism rate, which could relate to مثلا holiday season or vacation, not an outbreak of disease. مثل الغياب لما يصير في لما يصير الغياب خلال الأيام اللي يعلن فيها مثلا عن عواصف رملية شديدة، أو عن مثلا هطول أمطار غزيرة ممكن تكون مسببة لسيول. فهنا الغياب في المدارس أو عن الأعمال حيرتفع معدله، لكن هذا ارتفاع معدل الغياب لا يشير لمثلا انتشار مرض معدي، لك يشير مثلا لحالة جوية. So here we have some examples of syndromic surveillance. This is from the World Health Organization, and this is from the Ministry of Health. The World Health Organization حاليا they provide information to countries on how to prepare and precautions to the new coronavirus, the COVID-19, and they give guidelines and to prevent and prepare for the spread of the virus. So they will they told the countries to monitor the sick people, test the sample, treat the patients, control infection in health centers, and maintain the right supplies, and communicate with the public about the virus. And this is an example from the Ministry of Health, where they sent this announcement اللي هو عن تفشي وباء كورونا الجديد في الصين، والاحترازات الوقائية لمنع انتشار الوباء في المملكة العربية السعودية. فهنا تعليمات أو معلومات عن هذا الوباء، والاحتياطات اللي اتخذتها الدولة أو المفروض يتخذها الشخص لمنع انتشار الوباء، والميجرز اللي أخذتها الدولة لمنع انتشار الوباء. فمن الاحتياطات مثلا الشخصية اللي ممكن يطبقها العامة أنهم يغسلون يدهم لمدة 40 ثانية، أنهم مثلا يعطسون في مناديل ورقية أو في المرفق، وأنهم مثلا يبتعدون عن الأماكن المزدحمة، وعن ويكون في social distance between the individuals. كمان من هذه من الميجرز البريفنتيف ميجرز والوقائية اللي اتخذتها المملكة، أنه يقفلون المدارس والأعمال، يخففون الموظفين، عدد الموظفين في الأعمال، المدارس تقفل، الدراسة تكون عن بعد، أيضا اللي هي حظر التجول في المدن الرئيسية أو في مناطق المملكة، أو بين التنقل بين مناطق المملكة. أول كان مثلا الحظر التجول من الساعة 6 صباحا إلى الساعة 7. الحين مثلا قدموا الوقت للساعة الثالثة مساء. وبعض المناطق مثلا مكة والمدينة فيها أحياء تم إغلاقها أو فرض حظر التجول عليها، ممنوع الخروج أو الدخول منها، وهذه كلها احتياطات لمنع تفشي الوباء في المملكة. توفير السبلايز، توفير المواد الغذائية، توفير المواد الطبية اللازمة للمستشفيات والمعدات الطبية اللازمة، آه، 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 تحذير الأفراد والإعلام أو آه، البيان الصحفي اليومي من وزارة الصحة لمتابعة أو تحديث المعلومات الخاصة بعدد المصابين وعدد المعافين وعدد وحالات الوفاة، وتقسيمها على المدن أو توزيعها على المدن. أيضا منع السفر، منع الخطوط الطيران، استقبال أو سفر المواطنين للخارج، إعادة المواطنين اللي يرغبون بالعودة اللي هم بالخارج، وحجزهم في أو عزلهم في فنادق أو أماكن مخصصة للعزل لمدة 14 مثلا يوم. هذه كلها وسائل ومجر اتخذت بناء على recommendations أو معلومات عن الوباء. أيضا كمان في معلومات خاصة بالعلاجات، كيف ممكن يعالجون الوباء وإيش أفضل العلاجات المتوفرة للوباء. In the last slide we have an example of the syndromic surveillance system or program called Biosense. This is a CDC web-based program that supports syndromic surveillance to improve disease detection, monitoring, and situational awareness for healthcare organizations. It reports by reporting any incidents from emergency room, pharmacy, and laboratory data. It has a search engines that can conduct a query by syndrome, location, and date. And the goal is to provide a web-based clearinghouse where the data can be stored, organized, searched, and analyzed from and by multiple parties of public health organizations and parties.